The blade came down at midnight, and the silver rang, 300 coins, counted onto an oak table. A price paid for a woman who had already given everything she had. She did not weep. She did not beg. She only watched the man she had loved turn his face away and refuse for the last time to look at her. Outside the keep, the snow was beginning. Inside the kitchens, an old man in a brown cloak pressed something cold into a young woman's palm and whispered 3 words that would unmake a kingdom. He had carried a secret for 23 winters. He would not carry it one more. Far to the north, in a fortress carved into the side of a mountain, a great hall stood empty. A throne of dark iron waited. A father had been waiting longer. He did not yet know. But the wind that night had turned. The wind was blowing south, and on the wind, very faintly, a wolf was beginning to wake. 300 silver pieces rang on the oak table. For that price, Lord Roderick Vosmeer sold the only woman who had ever bled for him. He thought he was discarding a useless thrall, a defective, a girl who could not shift. A loose end before his wedding. He did not know. He did not know he was handing the King of the North his lost daughter. He did not know that the old man who scrubbed his pots had a name the bards had stopped singing 23 years ago. He did not know that the wind, that very night, had turned. But the night the silver rang, none of that had happened yet. The night the silver rang began earlier. It began in a small room above the kitchens of Vosmeer Castle. It began with a needle and a thread and a woman whose hands had not yet learned how to refuse. The fire was dying. Smoke curled up the stone chimney of the servants' quarters. Outside, the wind howled like something wounded, like something hunting. Snow battered the leaded windows of Vosmeer Castle, and the candles guttered low. Idelle did not look up. Her hands worked. Steady, precise. The needle moved through torn flesh the way it had moved 100 times before. In through the skin, pull, out, not in again. Her fingers were stained dark with someone else's blood. His blood. Lord Roderick Vosmeer lay shirtless on the wooden cot, his pale chest streaked with crimson, his head turned away from her. 28 years old, the future alpha of the southern packs, heir to one of the oldest names in the realm. And tonight, he was bleeding because of her work, because of her hands. Because the rogue wolves had come for him again at the river crossing, and again he had limped home half dead, and again she had been the one waiting in the dark with hot water and clean cloth and a needle she sharpened herself. The 3rd time this year, Idelle pulled the thread tight. He did not flinch. That was how she knew he was awake. A sleeping man flinches. A conscious man controls his face. And Roderick controlled everything, his voice, his hands, his silences, especially his silences. "You're shaking," he said. His voice was rough from cold, from wine, from the long ride back through the storm. "I'm not, you are." She wasn't shaking. Not from the cold, not from the work. The shaking was something else. Something deeper. Something that had been crawling around inside her ribs for 3 weeks now, and she did not have a name for it yet. "Finish it," he said. She finished it. She tied the last knot. Cut the thread with the small knife from the kitchen. Pressed a strip of clean linen against his side. He sat up slowly, and his hand caught her wrist before she could withdraw. His thumb brushed the underside of her arm. "Stay," he said. It was not a request. It had never been a request. Idelle was 23 years old. She had been a thrall in Vosmeer Castle since she was a small girl. She did not remember a time before these walls. She did not remember a mother. She did not remember a father. She remembered an old man in a brown cloak walking her down a long road in the snow. And after that there was only the kitchens, and the kennels, and the lash. And then later there was Roderick at 15, throwing dice with the stable boys. Roderick at 20, learning the sword in the back courtyard. Roderick at 25, finding her crying in the wine cellar after his father beat her bloody for spilling the cream. That was the night it started. He had wiped the blood from her mouth with the corner of his sleeve. He had looked at her with something that was not pity and not hunger, but something stranger, something that made a girl who had never been seen feel suddenly visible. "When I am Alpha," he had whispered, "no one will ever lay a hand on you again." She had believed him. God help her. She had believed him. 3 years. 3 years of hidden corridors and stolen hours, and his mouth on her neck in the rooms where no one could see them. 3 years of him telling her she was the only one. 3 years of him telling her that someday, when the time was right, when the politics settled, when his father's debts were paid, he would stand in the great hall and call her his mate before all the gathered alphas. She had stitched his wounds. She had hidden his sins. She had loved him with the only kind of love a thrall is ever given. The silent kind. The kind that lives in shadow, and she had not asked for proof. Tonight she sat at the edge of his bed in the candlelight, his blood drying on her knuckles, and she let him pull her down beside him because she did not know how to be a woman who refused. Not yet. Not yet. He fell asleep before she did. She watched the firelight move across his sleeping face and thought, "This is the man I love." She thought, "This is the man who will save me." She thought, in the morning, he will tell me again that I am his. And in the morning, he did. The morning was different. The morning was the day everything came apart. It started with footsteps in the corridor. Idelle was on her hands and knees in the long gallery, scrubbing wax from the flagstones with a stiff brush. When the slow shuffle reached her ears, she did not need to turn. She knew the sound, knew the pause between each step, knew the slight drag of the right foot. Old Bram, 65 years old, bent at the shoulders, white hair tied back with a leather cord. He had served Vosmeer Castle since before Idelle was born. The kitchen master, the man who oversaw the wine, the man no one noticed because no one looked twice at old servants. He stopped beside her. He did not speak for a long moment. Then he set down a wooden bucket beside her elbow. The water inside it steamed faintly. Fresh water. Hot water. A small kindness in a place that did not give kindnesses. "Child," he said softly. "Bram, come to the wine cellar. Tonight." After the third bell, she paused. Her brush stopped mid-stroke. In all the years she had known him, Bram had never asked her to come anywhere. He had given her bread. He had given her sips of broth when she was sick. He had once pulled her behind a barrel when Lord Roderick, the late master of the house, came through in a black rage, looking for someone to strike. But he had never spoken to her like this. Soft. Urgent. There was some speaks who has carried something heavy for a very long time. "Why?" she asked. He looked down at her. His eyes were watery and gray and unreadable. "Because you are running out of time, child." He shuffled on before she could answer. She did not know what he meant. Not then. She would, soon enough. She came at the third bell. The wine cellar was the deepest room in the castle. Cold stone, iron-banded barrels. A single lantern burning low on a hook. Bram was waiting for her there with a cloth in his hands, polishing a goblet over and over. The way old men polish things when they need their hands to do something while their mouth does another. He set the goblet down. "Sit," he said. She sat on a crate. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "You must hear what I am about to say without interrupting. Can you do that?" "Yes, Lord Roderick is to be married." 3 words. 3. And the floor under her dropped out. She did not interrupt. She had promised. Bram went on. "The bride is Lady Cordelia of House Highmore. The contract was signed 2 winters ago. The dowry is paid. The ban has been registered with the Southern Council. The wedding will take place at Highmore Manor on the first new moon of the new year." Idelle's mouth opened. She closed it. "You promised," Bram said gently. She nodded. Her eyes were burning. 2 winters ago," she whispered. 2 winters. Yes, that is before. That is before he. That is before we. Yes, he told me. He told me there was no other. He told me when his father died he would have the freedom to choose, he said. He swore to me. Her voice was rising. Bram lifted one hand. "Child," he said. "Listen. She listened. There was a roaring in her ears, but she listened. He has known about Highmoor for 2 winters. He chose her 2 winters ago. Everything he has said to you since is a lie. Every promise, every whisper in the dark. He is a man who has been lying to you while he plans the wedding feast that will erase you from this castle. Why are you telling me this? She whispers. Because there is something else coming, something worse than the wedding. Worse? Yes. Worse? Yes, child. She was crying now. She could not help it. The tears were running down her face, and she did not bother to wipe them. What is worse than this? She said. Bram closed his eyes. When he opened them, there was something old in them. Something that did not belong to a kitchen master. Something that belonged to a man who had carried a secret for 23 years. You will know soon, he said, and when you do, I need you to remember one thing. What? You are not what they say you are. I am a thrall. No, child. I am a thrall, Bram. I am a thrall who could not even shift. I am a defective. I am nothing. You are not nothing. Then what am I? He did not answer. He only looked at her with that long, watery, broken old man look. And in his silence she heard something terrifying. She heard a man who knew exactly what she was, and who would not tell her because telling her now would not save her. She left the cellar without another word. She did not sleep that night. She lay on her thin pallet in the servants' loft and stared up at the rafters, and the wind screamed against the slate roof. And somewhere far away, she thought she heard a wolf howl, and she did not know whether the sound was real or whether it had come from inside her own chest. 3 days later, the horseman arrived. She was in the kitchen yard when she heard the horn, a long, low note, northern, foreign, the kind of horn that did not belong in southern lands. The kitchen girls dropped what they were doing and ran to the wall. Idelle did not run. Her feet did not move. The yard captain shouted orders. Men in livery scrambled for the gates. Hooves rang on frozen stone, and through the gatehouse came a column of riders in heavy black furs and dark steel, banners snapping above them. A black banner with a red claw upon it, the blood iron pack, the crown of the north. Idelle's hands were full of cabbage leaves. She did not remember dropping them. The leaves scattered around her feet, and a kitchen boy yelped and bent to gather them, and she stood very still in the cold sun with her empty hands at her sides. A man dismounted from the led horse, 45 years old, tall, iron-gray beard, a long scar that ran from his cheekbone down into the collar of his cloak. His eyes were the color of slate. He looked once around the courtyard and then looked again, and on the second look his eyes paused. Not on her, above her. On the carved arch over the kitchen door. A small thing. A thing she had never noticed. The arch was carved with a crescent moon and a star. The northerner's jaw moved. He moved on. He was led inside before Idelle could think. His name, she would learn later, was Lord Roderick of Far Mire. Sword hand of the king. The man whose word the north sent when the south owed a debt. And the south owed a debt. They called her to the great hall at twilight. She had been ordered to wash her face, to wear her one clean dress, to wait in the antechamber until summoned. She waited. She waited so long the candles burned down a full inch. Then the steward beckoned, and she walked into the hall. The fire was roaring. Men were drinking. Lord Roderick sat at the long table with a goblet in his hand, and Lord Roderick Vosmeer sat opposite him in his sable-lined doublet, looking very young and very pleased with himself. 2 other northern men flanked Roderick. They watched her come in without expression. Roderick did not look at her at all. That was how she knew. Kneel, the steward said. She knelt on the stones. Roderick set down his goblet. This one, he said. This one, Roderick agreed. She is thin. She heals quickly. She has no wolf, none we have seen. You sell us a defective. I sell you a thrall. What she becomes is no concern of mine. Roderick's slate eyes moved over Idelle slowly. He was not looking at her as a man looks at a woman. He was looking at her the way a hunter looks at a footprint in fresh snow. Carefully. Reading something. The price, Roderick said. 300 silver pieces, Roderick said, and the mining rights to the Whispering Caves for 3 full moons. You wanted 5 thralls. I sent 4 to the courtyard. This is the 5th. Garrick was silent. Idelle's hands were folded in her lap. Her hands were shaking. And she could not make them stop. She heard her own voice come out before she meant it to. Roderick. The hall went quiet. His name. Not his title, not his rank, just his name from a thrall. In open court, Roderick's jaw tightened. Silence, he said. Roderick, silence, look at me. He did not look at her. He raised his goblet to his lips, and he drank, slow and steady, like a man pretending the rain on the window is not falling. She felt something inside her crack. Not break, not yet. Crack. A long, jagged crack down the middle of a thing she had not known was a wall. 3 years, she said. Be silent. 3 years I stitched your wounds. Garrick, continue. 3 years I fed you in the dark when your father would have starved you for the fall at the hunt. Garrick, I bled for you, she said, and the hall went quiet again, because she was bleeding, not from a wound. Her nose was bleeding. A single thin line of red ran from her left nostril down to her upper lip. She had not noticed. She wiped at it absently with the back of her wrist. Garrick's gaze sharpened. He looked at the blood. He looked at her face. He looked at the blood again. A muscle worked in his jaw. Done, he said abruptly. Done? Roderick repeated. 300 silver. The mining rights. The 5 thralls. He stood up. He looked once more at Idelle, and in that look, she saw something she did not understand. Something almost like recognition. Almost like a man who had been told to look for a thing he did not believe in and had just seen it standing in front of him, and did not know what to do. Cuff her, he said. The northern guards came around the table. They were not gentle. They lifted her by her arms and slapped iron cuffs around her wrists. The metal bit into her skin. They marched her toward the heavy oak doors at the far end of the hall. She looked back once. Roderick was already turning to refill his goblet. He did not watch her go. The bond she had built in her mind between them, the bond she had decorated with 3 years of whispers and stolen hours, did not snap. It evaporated. It simply ceased to exist, as if it had never been real at all. As if it had been smoke, and in its place, deep inside her chest, something opened. Something that had been sealed shut for a very long time, a door of rust and iron. It did not swing open. It groaned. It groaned the way a door groans when a god is standing behind it. She did not know what it was. She would soon. Old Bram was waiting in the gatehouse passage. He was not supposed to be there. The northern guards barked at him. He bowed and stepped aside, the way an old servant steps aside, and they pushed Idelle past him, and as she passed him, his hand brushed hers. Something pressed into her palm. Some cold, small, heavy. She closed her fingers around it without looking. Do not let him see it, Bram whispered. Bram, when you reach the north, wear it. Do you understand me, child? Wear it where they can see, Bram. I do not understand any of this. You will. I am being given to the north. I know. Bram. Live, child. Live until the moon shows you who you are. The guards yanked her forward. She stumbled out into the snow. She glanced back. Bram was standing under the arch, with the crescent moon and the star carved above his white head. He was crying. He was crying without sound and without shame. An old man in a brown cloak, who had walked her down a long road in the snow when she was a small girl, and who was now watching her walk away from him on another road, in another snow, and they would not see each other again. She did not know that yet, but he did. The journey began that same night. There were 5 of them in chains, 4 men. Idelle, the men were southern criminals. A horse thief, a debtor, 2 poachers from the woods near the Whispering Caves. They wept, all 4 of them, when the column moved out through the snow. The youngest, the debtor, could not stop shaking. He was perhaps 19. He was missing 2 fingers on his right hand from a previous punishment. Idelle did not weep. She did not have weeping left in her What she had instead was a small, heavy thing pressed against her ribs, where she had hidden it inside the lining of her dress. A pendant. She had glimpsed it once in the dark when the cuffs let her hands reach that high. A silver crescent, a small star, a circle of moonlight and steel small enough to hide in the palm of a hand. She did not know why Bram had given it to her. She did not know what it meant. She only knew that he had given it to her, and that he had told her to live, and that she was going to live. She told herself this for 3 weeks. The debtor died on the 5th day. He simply sat down in the snow and did not stand up. The guards prodded him with the butts of their spears. They pulled at the chain. He did not stand. He closed his eyes. He smiled a little, the way a man smiles when he has decided, and then he was still. The horse thief died on the 11th day. Fever from a cut that had gone sour. The first poacher fell into a crevasse at the foot of the Frost Peak passes. The second made it almost to the gates of Wormwatch. Keep before his lungs gave out. Idelle did not die. Idelle should have died. She knew this. She knew it the way a person knows the sky is up and the ground is down. By the 8th day, her shoes were rags. Her feet should have rotted off in the cold. They did not. By the 12th day, the bread had run out. Her body should have weakened. It did not. By the 17th, her bruises had healed without scabbing, and her nails had grown back where they had broken, and she sometimes caught herself walking faster than the guards' horses without noticing. The cold did not bite her. That was the strangest thing. The wind came howling down the passes like the breath of dying gods. And the northern men pulled their fur cloaks closer. And Idelle, in her thin southern wool, simply walked. She did not shiver. She did not slow. Lord Roderick rode at the head of the column. He did not speak to her. He looked at her. He looked at her every night across the fire, the way a man looks at a thing he has been told all his life is impossible. She felt his eyes the way a deer feels the eyes of the hunter, in the trees. On the 18th night, the rogues came. They came in the 2nd hour after midnight, when the campfire was low and the watchman was nodding. They came in a wave of gray and brown shapes out of the snowy dark. The first northern guard was dead before he could draw breath. The camp exploded, steel on fang, snarl on shout. Idelle was thrown against a tree by the rush of bodies. The chain around her wrists yanked tight, and a wolf the size of a horse came at her low and silent. She did not have a weapon. She had a chain and a pendant and a body that was supposed to be defective. The wolf leapt. Time stopped. Idelle saw the leap the way one sees lightning. Slowly, frame by frame, the drawn-back lips, the yellow fangs, the pink wet mouth. The yellow-green eyes locked on her throat. Something inside her chest opened. The door of rust and iron groaned wide. And from somewhere very far back, somewhere older than her bones, a voice spoke, not in words, in knowing. The way a mother knows her child is in another room. The voice said, "Stand up, daughter." Idelle stood up. She did not flinch from the leap. She stepped into it. Her hands came up, bound, cuffed, bloody. She caught the wolf's chest in the iron of her chains and she shoved, and her shove was not the shove of a starved thrall in rags. Her shove was the shove of something else. Something that lived inside her skin and had been sleeping for a very long time. The wolf flew backward, 20 feet, maybe 30. It struck a tree with a crunch that shook snow from the branches, and it did not get up. Idelle stood there with her cuffed hands in front of her. She was breathing very hard. Her breath was steaming silver in the firelight, not white, not gray, silver, a pale, faint silver, like the breath of a thing that had moonlight in its lungs. She turned her head. Lord Roderick was watching. He had killed his own wolf in the same moment, his sword wet to the hilt. He stood in the trampled snow with the body at his feet, and he was watching her. His face did not move, but his eyes did. His eyes flicked once to the pendant under her collar. Just once. The pendant had slipped out during the fight, the silver crescent caught in the firelight, and Roderick saw it. He did not speak. He simply turned away. He gave orders. He had 2 of his men reset the camp. He had the watchman who had fallen asleep flogged. He did not flog Idelle. He did not chain her tighter. But in the morning, when the column moved out, there was a thick fur cloak laid across her pallet. She put it on. She did not look at Garrick. She felt his eyes anyway. The frost peaks loomed for 2 days before Idelle ever saw them. She felt them first. A pressure in the air. A weight in the bones. The mountains were so vast that they bent the wind around themselves, and the snow that fell at their feet fell differently than southern snow. Heavier, stranger, as if it had been waiting longer to land. On the morning of the 21st day, the storm broke, the sky tore open. The sun, pale and bloodless, came pouring through, and there ahead of them, black against the white wall of the world, rose Wormwatch Keep. Idelle stopped walking. A guard cuffed her between the shoulders. She did not move. She had never seen a thing like Wormwatch Keep. It was not a castle. A castle is a thing built of stones men quarried. Wormwatch Keep was a thing carved. The whole front face of a mountain had been cut and shaped into walls and battlements and high black towers, and the towers leaned out over a sheer drop into clouds, and the iron gates were 3 times the height of any gate she had ever seen in the south. It looked like a crown. It looked like a crown a god had hammered into the side of the world. The horns blew from the high towers. They had been seen. The column moved forward. The road climbed. Idelle climbed with it, and her chained wrists ached, and her feet, wrapped in rags inside their fur boots, ached, and her shoulders ached, and her heart ached, and somewhere under all of it, the door of rust and iron was groaning again. She put her hand inside her dress. She felt the pendant. She closed her fingers around it. When you reach the north, wear it. Wear it where they can see. She fumbled with the chain. The cuffs made it hard. But she managed, walking, to lift the pendant out from under her collar and let it hang on its thin silver chain against her chest. She did not look at it. She walked. The gates of Wormwatch Keep opened. They opened with a sound like an iron bell being struck once and held. The bailey was massive, big enough to drill an army in. The air inside it stank of pine sap and smoke and raw meat and the heavy musk of lichen flesh. Warriors stood in ranks against the walls, some in human form, plated in dark steel, some in their wolf forms, shapes the size of small horses, sitting motionless with their heads lowered. Hundreds of them. The thralls behind her were sobbing. Idelle was not. Her chain rattled as she walked into the bailey. The northern guards spread out around her. Garrick rode to the head of the column and dismounted. A steward in heavy black robes came forward to take a parchment from his hand. Idelle looked up. At the far end of the bailey, beyond the warriors, beyond the smoke, was a raised stone dais. On the dais was a throne of dark iron and animal skulls. Behind the throne was a great oak door bound in black metal. The door opened. The hall went silent. A man stepped out. He was huge. He was perhaps 7 feet tall, broad through the chest, wearing the pelt of a great gray bear across his shoulders. His hair was black, falling around his shoulders. His beard was streaked with iron gray. His face was scarred at the jaw. His eyes were red. Not red like blood. Red like coals. Red like the inside of a forge when it has been burning all day. Royal red. She had never seen eyes like that. The very air of the bailey changed. The warriors did not move, but something passed through them all. A pressing down. A bowing of necks no one had bowed. The horses shifted on their hooves and would not look up. This, Idelle thought, is what a god feels like. The king walked to the front of the dais. He glanced once at his sword hand. Garrick, my king, you bring me a tribute. I bring you the southern tribute. 3 thralls. 2 were lost. The 3rd is here. With 4 others taken at Vosmeer, the king's red eyes flicked across the thralls. He did not look at Idelle. He waved one heavy hand. Brand them. Send them below. Get them out of the snow. A guard moved. The guard came at Idelle from behind. He grabbed her by the chain at her wrists, hard, and yanked. The yank was meant to drag her forward to the branding stand, but it was harder than he intended, and the chain snapped tight across the back of her neck, and the collar of her ragged dress, already torn, tore further. It tore down and back. The pendant against her chest swung free, a small silver crescent, a small star. It caught the pale sun. King Magnus Ironclaw stopped breathing. Idelle saw it. From across the bailey, with 70 yards of stone between them and 100 warriors in the way, she saw a man twice her size simply stop. His chest froze. His shoulders locked. The wind moved his hair, and nothing else of him moved at all. Then his nostrils flared. He inhaled. He inhaled the way a man inhales when he has spent 23 years smelling absences. His eyes blew wide, and a sound began low in his chest. A sound that was not a word. A growl, low and ancient. A growl that vibrated through the flagstones and made every wolf in the bailey drop, instantly, to its belly. Garrick fell to one knee. The other guards fell. The horses lay down. The whole bailey dropped without a sound. Faces in the snow, throats bared. Only Idelle remained standing. She stood with her hands cuffed, and her dress torn, and the pendant glittering on her chest, and her silver-flecked eyes wide. King Magnus Ironclaw moved. He came down off the dais. He did not walk. He flowed. A man that size should not have moved that fast. He crossed the bailey in long, terrifying strides, his bare pelt rippling, his great hands open at his sides. He stopped 3 feet from her. Up close, he was a wall. Up close, she could feel the heat of him. He smelled of tas ancient smoke and something else she could not name and would later understand was simply blood. Her blood. The same blood as his. She did not move. His eyes burned down at her, red, wet at the corners. He looked at the pendant. He looked at her face. He looked at the pendant again. His hand came up, slow, 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 a hand the size of a hammer. And he did not touch the pendant. He did not touch her. He simply held his palm open in the air between them, the way a man holds his palm out to a wild thing he does not want to frighten. "Where?" he said. His voice was a stone falling down a deep well. "Where did you get this?" She tried to speak. Her throat did not work. She tried again. "An old man," she whispered. "An old man at Vosmeer Castle. He told me to wear it when I reached the north. His name, Bram." The king's whole face changed. It crumpled. It crumpled the way a face crumples when a man has been holding a thing tight for 23 years and is told, suddenly, that the thing was real all along. He went down. The king of the north, alpha of all alphas, master of 100 mountain leagues, went down in the snow on one knee, then on both. He knelt in the snow at the feet of a chained thrall in a torn dress, and his great head bowed, and the bare pelt slid off one shoulder, and his huge hand came up at last, and trembled in the air above her cuffed wrist. He did not touch her. He could not. He did not yet have the right. A single tear came down his scarred face. He whispered, "They told me you were dead." Idelle's knees gave. She did not fall. The cuffs held her up. She hung there in her cuffs in front of the kneeling king. In the silent bailey, with 100 warriors face down in the snow, and the wind blowing her dark hair across her face, and the pendant burning silver against her chest. She did not understand any of it. But somewhere deep inside her, the door of rust and iron was now wide open, and through it very far back, in a place that was older than her bones, a wolf raised her great white head and began, at last, to listen. A wolf the size of a war horse, a wolf with a coat the color of starlight, a wolf who had been waiting 23 years to hear her name. She woke into warmth. That was the first wrong thing. Idelle had not woken into warmth in 23 years. She had woken into cold stone, into the smell of ash, into the bark of a kitchen master and the slap of a hard hand, into the gray pre-dawn of a thrall's loft where the wind came in through the slate. Not this, not deep velvet quilts, not the smells of cedar wood and beeswax, not a fire so large it would have heated the entire servants' wing of Vosmeer Castle, not the soft, steady tick of a great brass clock somewhere in the room, the kind of clock only kings owned. She did not move. She did not open her eyes. Because if she opened her eyes, the warmth might end. And if the warmth ended, she would have to be afraid again. And she did not have any fear left. So she listened. A log popped in the fire. A floorboard creaked. Someone was breathing in the chair beside the bed. Slow, heavy. The breath of a man who had been awake for a long time and did not intend to leave. Idelle opened her eyes. The ceiling above her was painted. Painted. Not whitewashed. Painted in deep blue, and across the blue ran a long, careful pattern of silver stars, and through the stars curled a single crescent moon, the same crescent as the pendant, the same crescent that had hung in carved stone over the kitchen arch at Vosmeer, the same crest, everywhere. Her breath caught, easy. The voice was low, deep, the voice of a man who knew how to talk to wild things. She turned her head. King Magnus Ironclaw was sitting beside the bed. He had pulled his great chair close. He was not in his bear pelt now. He was in a simple black tunic. The sleeves rolled to his elbows. His arms were thick with old scars. His hands, folded in his lap, were the size of dinner plates. His eyes, in the firelight, were no longer the burning red of a war king. They were tired. They were the eyes of a man who had not slept. He held out a silver goblet. "Drink this slowly." She did not take it. "Drink it," he said, softer, almost a plea. "Or I will sit here another hour." She took it. Her hand did not shake. She drank. The broth was warm and fragrant. Bone marrow. Wild thyme. She drank half the goblet. She set it down on the side table. She looked at the king. "My lord," she said. "No, my king. No, child." Then what? He looked at her for a long moment. "Father," he said. "If you can bear it." Idelle did not breathe. Father, that word. That had never lived in her mouth. That word had been a hole in her since she was small. A shape with no person inside it. A door with no room behind it. Father. She closed her eyes. She did not open them for a long time. "Tell me," she finally said, so he told her. He told it slowly, like a man unpacking a chest he had not opened in 23 years. He told her about Queen Isolde, his mate, the light of his life, the one wolf in all the world who could make him laugh in winter. She had hair, the color of dark honey. She sang to the falcons in the high mews. She had loved the high passes. More than any room in any castle, she had given him a daughter in the spring of 1403. A daughter with eyes that were flecked with silver from the day she opened them. A daughter so strong of bloodline that the midwives gasped when she cried, pure, royal blood, lunar blood, the kind that had not flowed in the north in 5 generations. They had named her after a moonflower that grew only above the snow line. Magnus stopped. He looked at his hands. He could not say the name yet. He was a king, and he was an iron-hearted man, and even now, with his daughter sitting 2 feet from him in a velvet quilt, he could not speak the name his wife had given her. He went on. The fire happened in the 4th month after the birth. Late summer. He had been gone 3 days, hunting a sickness in the Farmire packs. He came home to smoke. He came home to the nursery wing collapsed. He came home to his wife's body, cooling in the soot. He did not come home to his daughter. They tore the rubble apart for a week. They never found a small body. For 3 months, he had hope. For 3 years, he had grief. For 23 years, he had hunted. He hunted the Blackthorn Company first, the mercenaries. He killed 100 men, and then 100 more. And he learned that they were only blades, bought with foreign gold. The plan had come from the south. He had never proven who, so he had waited. He had waited and hunted and waited and aged. And his red hair had gone iron gray, and his back had bent a ½ inch under the weight of waiting, and 23 winters had passed without his daughter, until the day his sword-hand Garrick brought a chained Thrall into his bailey with a silver crescent on her chest. He stopped speaking. He looked up. Idelle was crying. She had not noticed. The tears had come on their own. They were running down her face and into the collar of her nightdress, and her shoulders were not shaking. Just tears. Silent. Old. Magnus reached out. He did not touch her face. He laid one massive hand, palm up, on the bed between them. She looked at it. She laid her hand on his. Magnus closed his eyes. He did not weep, but the breath went out of him. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then she said, very quietly, "Bram." He nodded. "Bram," she said again. "Bram of the East Tower," Magnus said. "Captain of your mother's guard. The most loyal sword in the north. The man I trusted to carry her through her labor. The man I trusted to stand at her cradle when I rode out. He was a kitchen master," Idelle whispered. "He scrubbed the pots. He polished the wine. He carried you down a long road in the snow," Magnus said. She stopped. She remembered. A long road. A small girl's hand inside an old man's. The memory was foggy. He had bought her bread from a peddler. He had told her when she cried that crying was a thing the wind would do for her if she let it. "How?" she whispered. "I was a baby. He could not have brought a baby into Vosmeer Castle without questions. I remember being a small girl, not a baby. He hid you," Magnus said. "He hid you for 5 years in a small fishing village on the southern coast, with a midwife he trusted. When the village was no longer safe, he brought you to Vosmeer. He gave the steward a story about an orphan from the borderlands. He took the lowest post in the castle so he could watch over you. He stayed for 23 years. He gave up his name, yes. He gave up his pack, yes. He spent 23 years scrubbing pots. To keep you alive." Idelle pressed both her hands to her mouth. She did not make a sound. But the door of rust and iron, that door deep in her chest, groaned open a finger wider. She trained. She trained for 10 days before she ever set foot in the moonlight again. Garrick was her tutor. He was a hard man. He did not soften because she was the king's daughter. He did not pause because she was 23 years thin and 23 years untaught. He looked at her in the cold yard on the first morning in the trousers and tunic the seamstresses had cut for her, and he said, "Lift the sword." She lifted it. It was the lightest blade in the armory. Her arm shook. "Lift it again." She lifted it again. Again. By noon she could not feel her arm. By evening she could not lift a spoon. She was a southern thrall in a northern court, and her body, which had carried buckets and scrubbed flagstones for 23 years, did not know what to do with a sword. It learned. It learned faster than it should have. By the 3rd day, the sword was light in her hand. By the 5th day, she could turn it the way Garrick turned his. By the 7th, she could disarm a sparring guard with a flick of her wrist. The guard was a man twice her weight. He sat down hard in the snow and stared up at her with an expression somewhere between fear and joy. He had served the king for 20 years. He had been waiting 20 years for this lost princess to come home. He bowed his bare head into the snow. Idelle helped him up. Garrick watched all of it from beside the rack of practice blades. He did not smile. Garrick did not smile. But his slate eyes had something in them. The eyes of a man who had been told to wait, and had waited, and now saw, at last, what he had been waiting for. "You learn fast," he said one night. She was unbinding her hands at the long oak table by the fire. "It is in the blood," she said. "It is, my lady. Do not call me lady. What would you have me call you?" She thought about it. "Idelle is enough," she said. "Until I know who I am, I do not want a bigger name. Idelle is a southern name. It is what I have. Then it is what you have." He poured her watered wine. "Tomorrow night," he said. "The moon is full." She set down the wine. "How will I know?" "You will know. What if I cannot?" "You will. What if it does not come?" "It will, Garrick." He was silent. "What if it does not come?" she said again, softer. The voice of a small girl in a thrall's loft. "What if I am defective after all?" Garrick set down his cup. He looked at her with the same expression he had worn over the campfire on the road, the look of a man examining a footprint in fresh snow. "You broke a rogue wolf with a chain across his chest. Idelle, Idelle, you broke a rogue wolf with a chain. You walked from Vosmeer to Wormwatch in your shoes and rags. You stood in the bailey of the King of the North with your collar torn and did not bend your knee. There is nothing defective in you. Nothing. Whatever the boy who sold you told you was a lie. Boy, she said. She did not realize she had said it. Garrick raised one gray eyebrow. Lord Roderick Vosmeer, he said carefully, is 28 years old. By the count of the North, that is a boy. A boy who plays with men's titles. Idelle was silent. Garrick saw the silence. He read it. You loved him, yes. 3 years. Yes. Did he love you? No. You answer too quickly. I have had 3 weeks to know it. Garrick nodded slowly. It is a hard thing, he said, to learn that a man who put his head in your lap was only resting until he could find a better pillow. She looked into the fire. It is harder, she said, to learn that you were never a pillow at all. You were the rag he used to wipe his blade clean. Garrick exhaled. Yes, he said, that is harder. The next night, the moon was full. Magnus did not come with her into the forest. He stood at the high window of the great hall and watched her go. Beside him stood Garrick, and beside Garrick stood 2 of the oldest pack elders, men whose beards reached their belts. They were all silent. They were silent because they did not know if it would work. A royal cub's wolf is sealed by absence. The pack restores it. The bloodline calls it. But 23 years is a long time, and no one in the records had ever been sealed for so long. If she could not shift tonight, with the moon full and her father standing in his own keep, she might never shift at all. The old men did not say this aloud, but they thought it, and Magnus thought it. And Idelle, walking out into the snowy tree line with a cloak around her shoulders and her hair loose down her back, thought it too. She walked. She walked past the gate sentries. They bowed. She walked past the outer ward. She walked past the practice yard. She walked into the trees. The forest at the foot of Wormwatch Keep was old. The pines were as thick around the trunk as a horse was wide. They reached straight up into the dark, 200 feet, 300, and the moonlight came down through them in pale columns. She walked deep, until the lights of the keep were tiny, until the wind was thin, until the silence was so complete she could hear her own heart. She stopped. She stood in a small clearing where the snow was untouched. Pale silver, pale blue, pale gold where the moon fell. She let the cloak fall. She knelt. She closed her eyes. She thought of her mother. She did not know her mother's face. She had a portrait in her chamber now, but a portrait was not a face. A portrait was an idea. She knew her mother had hair the color of dark honey. She knew her mother had sung to the falcons. She knew her mother had been killed in a nursery, in the spring of 1403, defending a small cradle she could not save. She thought of her mother. She thought of Bram. She thought of Bram's old hands wrapping a pendant in her palm. She thought of Bram's face under the carved stone arch as she was marched out of Vosmeer Castle. She thought of Bram, 23 years of him, scrubbing pots, polishing wine cups, never once breaking, never once letting the secret slip. She thought of Magnus. She thought of his great hand laid open on the bed between them. She thought of Garrick. She thought of her own hands. And then, very softly, in the silence of the snow, she said, I am here. The door opened. It did not creak this time. It did not groan. It simply opened, wide, all the way. And out of it walked a wolf. The pain came first. It came the way pain comes when a body has been holding a thing too long. Her spine arched. Her shoulders pulled back. Her ribs cracked outward. Her jaw lengthened, and she heard her own teeth changing. And the sound was inside her skull. But she did not scream. She was past screaming. She felt something white and silver pour up her spine. She felt her bones answer. She felt her skin remember a shape it had never worn. The clearing exploded with light. A shockwave of pale silver pushed out from her, ringed across the snow, knocked the icicles from the lowest pine branches. Far above in the keep, the windows rattled. Far below, in the valley, an owl flew up out of the trees and screamed once, into the night. When the light cleared, she was on 4 feet. She was massive. She was a wolf the size of a war horse, and her coat was the color of starlight on fresh snow. pure white, almost iridescent, as if every hair on her was woven from a single thread of moonlight. Her eyes, when she opened them, glowed silver, not the silver of metal, the silver of the moon itself. Cold, old, alive. She lifted her great head. She breathed in the night. She raised her muzzle. She howled. The howl rolled out of her chest the way a great bell rolls out of a tower. Long. Pure. Ancient. It rolled across the foothills. It climbed the ridges. It reached the high passes. And the wolves of the blood iron pack, every one of them, in their watchtowers and their dens and their great halls, lifted their heads in answer. 100 throats answered her. 200. 3. The whole north sang back. And on the high window of the great hall, King Magnus Ironclaw, War King, Alpha of Alphas, master of 100 mountain leagues, finally wept. He wept the way a stone weeps, slowly, carefully, without sound. The tears slid down his scarred face and into his iron beard, and Garrick, standing beside him, did not look at him, because there are some things a man does not let another man see. Idelle came back to the keep in human form an hour before dawn. She came back changed. She found Magnus in the war room. He was alone, looking down at a map of the north and the south. He looked up when she came in. He did not speak for a long time. Then he said, "You sang. Your mother used to sing like that." She did not know what to answer. She came to the table. She looked down at the map, Wormwatch Keep. Drawn in black ink, the frost peaks, the long road south, the whispering caves, the Blackwater River, and then, in a circle of red ink far to the south, Vosmeer Castle, father, daughter. There is something I must do. I know. He marries on the first new moon. I know. I do not want him dead. Magnus looked up. Tell me, I want him to lose everything he sold me to gain. I want him to kneel in the dirt of the courtyard he wanted to inherit. I want him to know, in front of every alpha he ever bowed to, that he traded a queen for a bag of silver. And then I want him to live. As a rogue. As nothing. As the thing he tried to make me. Magnus was silent for a long moment. Then a small, slow smile touched the corner of his beard, a wolf's smile. You are my daughter, I am. He turned back to the map. Then we plan a wedding. The first rumors reached Vosmeer Castle 10 days later. A merchant from the Blackwater told the kitchen steward over a cup of warm wine that a strange light had been seen in odds of the frost peaks. A silver flash, like a piece of moon falling. A messenger from the southern packs told Lord Roderick at breakfast that the blood iron pack had been seen mobilizing. 200 warriors at least. Possibly more. Roderick laughed at him. For what? For 300 silver and 4 dead thralls? The messenger bowed and withdrew. But the messenger did not laugh. A traveling minstrel, 2 nights later, sang in the great hall of Vosmeer a new song. A song about a lost wolf princess returned to her father. A song with a chorus about a white wolf coming down out of the snow. The minstrel was halfway through the 3rd verse when Roderick stood up. The hall went quiet. Roderick walked the length of the long table. He took the minstrel's lute. He smashed it once, hard, against the corner of the table. The strings popped with a sad, lonely sound. Another song, he said. The minstrel sang another song. Roderick sat down. He drank a great deal of wine. In his dreams there was a wolf, a white wolf. It stood at the foot of his bed in the dark and looked at him with eyes the color of the moon, and he could not look away, and the wolf did not eat him and did not touch him. The wolf only watched him, for hours, for nights, for a week. He woke each morning with his sheets damp with sweat. His right hand throbbed, the hand he had used to throw the pouch of silver across the table, the hand he had used to refuse to look at Idelle. He told himself it was the wine. He did not tell himself the truth. The truth came on a Tuesday. It came in the form of a small wooden box. A merchant from the Whispering Caves brought it. He said he had been paid in advance by a southern stranger to bring it to Lord Roderick of Vosmeer. The seals on the box was a black wax seal, pressed with a crescent moon and a star. Roderick recognized the seal. He had seen it on tapestries in the great halls of distant northern keeps. He had seen it carved into stone over an old kitchen arch in his own castle. He felt the blood leave his face. He took the box to his private study. He set it on the desk. He stared at it. Oh my, for a long time. He did not open it because there was a part of him, somewhere down very deep, that already knew what was inside. He opened it. Inside the box, wrapped in a square of black silk, was a small object, a finger. It was an old man's finger, knotted, calloused. The skin gray. Around the finger was tied a strip of paper. On the paper, in small, careful letters, was written, "You took an old man's hand in your own 3 weeks before he died. He told you nothing. He told her everything. She is coming." Roderick made a sound in his throat that was not a word. In the bottom of the box, beneath the silk, was a single silver piece, stamped with a Vosmeer crest, dated 3 winters ago. One of the 300 Roderick had given Lord Roderick at the bargaining table, a returned coin. Roderick sat down, he poured wine, he drank. He thought, the old man. He thought, the old man in the kitchens, he thought. Bram, 3 weeks ago. He had heard rumors. He had heard the kitchen master had been seen slipping something to Idelle in the lower passage. He had ordered Bram brought to the questioning chamber, because loose ends. He had been very careful, he had told himself, with the old man. The old man had been very stubborn. He had been so stubborn. Roderick had ended it before learning a single thing, until now. Until now, the box on his desk told him that the old man had not been stubborn out of nothing. The old man had been stubborn because he had something to protect, and the something he had been protecting was Idelle. Roderick lifted the finger out of the box. He looked at it. He thought, what have I done? He thought, oh gods, what have I done? Far to the north, in a high tower of Wormwatch Keep, Idelle stood at her window. She was dressed in northern leather and silver. Her hair had been braided down her back by the seamstress that morning, in the old royal fashion. Her hands rested lightly on the stone sill. She felt, in her chest, the small low pulse of a thing she did not entirely understand yet. She felt that very far away, in the south, a man had just opened in a small wooden box. She felt his fear. She felt it the way a fisherman feels a tug on a long line. She smiled. It was a small smile. It was not a kind one. A knock came at her door. Come. Lord Roderick entered. He carried a parchment. He bowed, my lady, Roderick. The merchant has been paid in full, he said, and his memory. He remembers only that he carried a box from the north for a generous stranger. Good. The coin in the box. Yes, it was the marked one. The one with the chip at the rim? Good. Roderick paused, my lady. He will know it was from the north. I want him to know it was from the north. But he will not know it was from you. He will guess. He will tell himself it was the king. He will tell himself it was my father. He will spend tonight convincing himself, with a great deal of wine, that the king has discovered the truth. He will send messengers. He will tighten his guard. He will make enemies of people he should have kept close. He will do half my work for me before I ever arrive. Roderick bowed his head. You are your father's daughter. I am my mother's daughter, too. I think she would be proud. Tell me about her. Roderick stepped inside the chamber. He closed the door. He pulled out a chair by the fire. He talked for an hour. He told her about Queen Isolde, a woman who had laughed at a stuck-up southern emissary in the great hall once until the emissary turned red and forgot his own treaty. A woman who had slipped out of the keep one autumn night in a stable boy's clothes, just to ride to the Falcon Mews, just to sing. A woman who had cried openly in front of the whole council when the kitchen master's daughter had died of fever. A woman who had loved Magnus the way a hawk loves the sky. He told her about the night the queen died. He told her that the queen had not died defending herself. The queen had died standing in front of a small cradle. She bought you 12 seconds, Roderick said softly. 12 seconds, my lady, before they cut her down. 12 seconds was enough. Idelle pressed her hand against her mouth. Bram came up the back stair in those 12 seconds. He took you out the servant's door. He killed 2 men on the way down. He carried you in his cloak to the South Road. He gave up everything to carry you 23 years. Idelle could not speak. Garrick lowered his eyes. And now Vosmeer has killed him for it. She nodded once, then she said, "Bring me the list, my lady." Bram had a list. I know it. He spent 23 years preparing me for this. He would not have died without leaving me one last thing. Garrick rose slowly, my lady. Find it. He found it 11 days later. It came in by horsemen in the deep dark of the morning. The horseman had ridden so hard his mount was nearly dead under him. He carried, inside an oilskin wrapped twice and sealed with kitchen wax, a single folded piece of parchment, brown with age, creased 100 times from years of being hidden in the lining of an old man's coat. Idelle was called from her chamber. She sat at the council table in the great hall. Magnus sat beside her. Garrick stood at her shoulder. 3 old elders waited at the far end. She unfolded the parchment. She read. She read the 7 names slowly. She read them in the careful, sharp handwriting of an old man who had been a kitchen master in a southern castle for 23 years. 7 southern names, 7 lordlings, 7 men or their houses who had paid Blackthorn Company gold to ride into Wormwatch, keep in the spring of 1403, and burn the nursery and kill a queen. The first name on the list made Idelle stop breathing. The first name was Lord Aldrich Vosmeer, Roderick's father, who had died of a fall from his horse 5 years ago. Drunk in his own pasture, Roderick's father, who had left his only son a castle and a title and a treasury filled with stolen wealth. Idelle felt the air leave her. She closed her eyes. She thought of all the times she had stitched Roderick's wounds. She thought of all the times he had limped home from a rogue attack. She thought of how the rogues had always seemed to find him alone, how they had always seemed to know where he would be, how they had never killed him, how they had only hurt him. She opened her eyes. Father, Magnus was already pale. He had read over her shoulder. Yes. The rogue attacks on Roderick? Yes. They were not rogues. No, they were yours, mine, or what remained of mine. Hunters who had been looking for Aldrich Vosmeer's blood for 20 years. They knew he had died. They knew his son had inherited. They knew the bloodline was still walking somewhere in Vosmeer lands. Idelle stared at the names on the parchment. She said it out loud. Slowly, I stitched the wounds of the son of the man who killed my mother, my lady. 3 years, my lady. I broke my fingers on a bone needle through his ribs. I kept him alive when the North was trying to kill him, for what his father did to me. She set the parchment down. The room was very quiet. Garrick laid a hand, very softly, on the back of her chair. He did not speak. Magnus, beside her, said nothing. The fire crackled. Idelle looked at the names. 7 names. 7 houses. 7 southern lordlings who had paid for a queen's death, and then sat at the same banquet tables every winter, smiling at each other over candles, drinking the same wine. She thought of Roderick's hand on her hair in the dark. She thought of his wedding. She thought of the new moon. She thought of Cordelia Highmore's father, whose name was the 3rd on the list. She thought of how 7 names would all be in one place, in one courtyard, in 1 hour, on the day of a southern wedding. A slow smile crept across her face. Not a kind smile, a queen's smile. She folded the parchment. She placed it under her hand. Father, daughter, sound, the muster. Magnus did not answer. He simply turned his red eyes to Garrick. Garrick bowed. He was already moving. That night, the horn blew over Wormwatch Keep. It blew long. It blew low. It blew the muster of the Blood Iron Pack. 200 warriors lit torches in their courtyards across the foothills. 300 more rose from their beds. Old captains who had not seen a campaign in 15 years walked stiffly to the armory and pulled down the steel that hung above their hearths. In her chamber, Idelle stood before the mirror in her riding leathers. She had a small iron coronet on her brow, a short sword at her hip, a long knife in her boot. She did not look like a thrall anymore. She looked like a wolf had walked out of the moon and put on the face of a woman. She placed the silver pendant against her chest. She closed her hand around it. Bram, mother, wait for me. Just a little longer. She walked down the stair. The great hall was full of warriors in dark steel. The doors were open to the courtyard. Outside in the snow, 300 wolves and 300 men were already forming up in the moonlight. Magnus Ironclaw. The king of the north stood at the head of the column. He turned. He held out one massive hand to her. Idelle walked down the stair. She took her father's hand. She mounted the horse the stable master held for her. She rode out under the lifted portcullis, with her father on her left and her sword hand on her right. And behind her rolled the army of a kingdom that had been broken for 23 years, and was now, finally, riding south. They rode south for 9 days. 300 riders in dark steel. 300 wolves running silent in the snow alongside them. The black banner with the red claw cracked above their heads, and the smaller silver banner, the crescent and the star of the lost royal line, snapped beside it, and the southern villages they passed bolted their doors before the column came in sight. Word traveled faster than they did. Word always does. By the 5th day, every alpha within 100 leagues knew that the king of the north was riding south. By the 6th day, every alpha knew why. By the 7th, the first of the 7 southern houses on Bram's list had quietly emptied their treasuries into wagons and tried to flee for the coast. They did not reach the coast. The Blood Iron Pack had outriders, fast riders, wolves on 4 legs who could cover 60 miles in a night and not feel it. The wagons of the first house, Lord Mareth of Stoneford, were taken at a river crossing. Lord Mareth was put in chains. His wagons of looted gold were turned around. They were sent back to the road in front of the marching column. And the king of the north, riding at the head of 300 warriors, looked once at the captive Lord Mareth as he passed. He did not speak to him. He did not need to. Mareth wept like a child the whole long ride south. Idelle rode at her father's right hand. She did not look at the prisoners. She kept her eyes on the road. She kept her hand on the pommel of her short sword. She kept her left hand, sometimes, on the silver pendant under her cloak. On the 8th day, the snow gave way to mud. The mud gave way to frost. The frost gave way at last on the 9th morning to the long green pasture road that climbed toward Highmoor Manor. The column slowed. Magnus turned in his saddle. "Garrick, my king, send the outriders to the manor wall. Quietly, take the kennels, take the granaries, take the gate. I want no fires, I want no sounds." "Yes, my king." Garrick rode off into the gray. Magnus turned to Idelle. "Daughter, father, it is your day." She nodded. He looked at her for a long moment. "I have one thing to ask of you. Ask. When you stand in that courtyard, do not become him." She raised her eyebrows. "I will not become Roderick. You misunderstand me. I do not mean him. Then who? I mean the man his father was. I mean Aldrich. I mean the wolf who burned a nursery. It is easy, child, after what they have done. It is easy. I have done it. Do not become him." Idelle was silent. She watched the road ahead. "I do not want them dead, father. Good. I want them ruined. Good. I want their names to be the worst thing a southern child can be called for 10 generations. Magnus smiled, a small, slow smile. A wolf's smile. Then ride, she rode. At Highmoor Manor. The wedding morning had begun. The bells were ringing. The kitchens had been working since the 2nd hour after midnight. Vast tables of meat, wheels of cheese as big as cartwheels, roasted swans with the feathers put back on for show. Cordelia Highmoor was being dressed in her chamber. 3 seamstresses worked the laces of her gown. 2 maids worked her hair. Her mother stood at the window. Her father, Lord Highmoor, was nowhere to be seen. He had ridden out very early with a small guard to inspect the eastern fields. He said, The truth was he had been gone since before dawn. The truth was Lord Highmore knew. He had received a raven 2 days ago. He had read the raven. He had burned it. He had told no one, and now, on the morning of his daughter's wedding, he was 60 miles east, riding for the coast. He did not reach the coast either. The wolves of the Blood Iron Pack caught him at noon. He was returned to Highmore by sundown. He was not yet a prisoner. He was simply a man, riding under a small, careful escort of strangers in dark steel. And the strangers smiled at him, and would not let him stop. And the strangers held his reins, and they brought him quietly back to his own manor. Inside her chamber, Cordelia Highmore laced her wedding bodice in silence. Her mother had left for the courtyard. She was alone with her own mirror. She looked at herself for a long time. She had known for years. She had known since she was 12, the night she had crept down the back stair to listen at her father's study door, and had heard him laugh, drunk with 2 other lords about gold paid to mercenaries in 1403. She had known, and she had said nothing. She had been a girl. She had been afraid. And then she had grown up and been promised in marriage to the son of one of the names she had overheard. And she had told herself, because telling herself was the only safe thing, that perhaps it had not been real. She slid her hand to the seam of her wedding gown. The dagger was there. The women of House Highmore were taught from the age of 9 to wear a dagger to their own weddings. She had carried hers since she was 12. Today, for the first time, she wondered if she would use it. The wedding party gathered in the great courtyard. The sun was setting. The courtyard had been hung with white silk. Braziers burned at the corners. A high stone altar had been set at the foot of the south wall, draped with the joined sigils of House Vosmeer and House Highmore. 300 guests in their finest velvets and furs, alphas from all the southern packs. Minor kings of the river marches, the old men of the council, the young men of the rising houses. The high priest stood at the altar. He held the golden cup of the marriage rite in his trembling hands. He cleared his throat. He raised the cup. "Bring the bride," he said. "Bring the groom." They came. Cordelia came down the long carpet from the east arch in a dress of cream silk and gold thread. And the lords gasped politely, the way lords are supposed to gasp at brides. She wore a small silver coronet. Her hair was pinned with pearls. Her face was beautiful and cold and very pale. She did not smile. Roderick came down the other carpet from the west arch. He was 36 hours unslept. He had been bathed and dressed by his attendants, almost the way a dying man is, bathed and dressed, slowly, carefully, with whispered words. His doublet of crimson and gold hung correctly on his shoulders. His belt buckle had been polished. His sword had been hung at his hip. He had not eaten. He had vomited twice that morning. He stood at the altar. He looked across at Cordelia. She looked back at him. She did not smile. He did not smile. The high priest lifted the cup. He began the words, "Beloved of the moon, beloved of the pack. We gather under this sky in the joining of 2 great bloodlines, the union of House Vosmeer and House Highmore." The wind rose. The wind rose strangely. Several of the older lords turned their heads. They had served on campaigns. They knew what a north wind sounded like when it was carrying horses. It was carrying horses. The high priest read on. "If any wolf objects to the merging of these 2 powerful bloodlines, let them speak now, or forever hold their peace beneath the moon." The horn answered. It was not a southern horn. It was the low, long, terrible horn of the north. It rolled across the courtyard like a slow black wave, and every single wolf at the wedding went still in the same heartbeat. The high priest dropped the golden cup, and the cup hit the stone at his feet and rolled, ringing, away across the flagstones. The horn blew again. The horn blew a 3rd time. And then, with a sound that was not a sound that was a feeling, a sound that was a deep iron groan, the great gates of Highmore Manor came off their hinges and crashed into the outer ward. They did not creak open. They came down. The dust rolled in, and out of the dust rode a column of dark steel. The Blood Iron Pack, 300 warriors in column, 2 abreast, banners snapping. They came in at a slow, terrible pace, the pace of men who have already won and are simply moving forward to claim the field. The southern guards who had been guarding the inner gate dropped their pikes and stepped aside. At the head of the column rode King Magnus Ironclaw. His red eyes were like coals. He came up the long courtyard with the column behind him. He did not draw his sword. He did not need to. The lords scattered. The ladies clutched their skirts. The high priest had gone the color of his own robes. Magnus drew his black war horse up at the foot of the altar. He did not dismount. He looked at Roderick. Roderick had gone the color of ash. The king's voice rolled out of his chest. It rolled across the courtyard. It rolled into the corners and rattled the goblets in the hands of the seated guests. "I have not come for your wine," he paused. "I have come to introduce the South to the future queen of the Lycan race." He turned his head. He gestured. The column parted. A single figure rode forward. She was on a tall, gray mare. She was cloaked in silver thread that shimmered like moonlight on water. Her face was veiled. Her hands were quiet on the reins. She rode up the courtyard. She drew her mare up at the foot of the altar. She did not speak. Roderick stared at her. He took half a step forward. He stopped. He could not move. The veiled rider reached up. She pulled the silver veil away from her face. 300 guests inhaled at once. It was Idelle. But it was not the Idelle of Vosmeer Castle. It was not the thin, starved thrall in a torn dress. This was a woman, 23 years old, tall in the saddle. Her hair was braided down her back in the old royal northern fashion. Her cheeks were burnished. Her eyes were silver, pale silver, moon silver. The kind of silver that did not exist in southern blood. On her brow sat a circlet of dark iron. At her throat hung Bram's pendant, Cordelia Highmore. Beside her stunned bridegroom made a small, helpless sound. The sound of a woman whose careful, dynastic, well-planned life had just walked out of a wedding gown and into a coffin. Roderick's knees buckled. He went down on one knee. He did not mean to. He could not help it. The Alpha command was already in the air, even before she spoke. Idelle dismounted. She did not hurry. She walked up the altar steps. She turned to face the courtyard. She did not look at Roderick. She looked at the gathered lords. She raised her voice. "My name is Idelle of the Blood Iron Pack, daughter of King Magnus Ironclaw, daughter of Queen Isolde of Farmire, here to the moon crown of the north. 23 years ago, my mother was murdered in her own nursery. The lords stared at her. They could not look away. I survived. I was hidden in the south by a man who loved my mother. He served for 23 years as a kitchen master in a southern castle. And 3 weeks ago, that man was tortured to death in a wine cellar at Vosmeer by the lord who knelt in my mother's blood at his father's banquets." She paused. She lifted a single folded parchment. In his coat, that old man had hidden a list. The names of the 7 southern lords who paid Blackthorn Company to ride into Wormwatch, keep in the spring of 1403, and burn the nursery and kill my mother. The courtyard was a tomb. I will read the names. She read them. Slowly. She read them with the names of their houses and the lands they ruled. And as each name fell into the silence, a different table in the courtyard erupted. Wives stood up. Allied lords turned in their chairs. Cousins moved away from cousins. The third name was Lord Highmore of Highmore Manor, father of the bride. The fourth was Lord Aldrich Vosmeer, father of the groom. A scream rose from somewhere in the back of the gathered ladies. Cordelia did not move. Cordelia knew. Roderick did not know. Roderick lifted his face from the stone and turned it slowly toward the altar. "No," he said. It was the first word he had spoken since the horn blew. "No," he said again. His voice was very small. "My father?" Idelle did not answer. "My father?" My father did not. Your father did, Idelle. Listen, I did not. I did not know. I swear it on every god, I did not know. You knew enough. No, I did not know about him. I did not know about the queen. I did not know any of it. You knew enough to torture an old man in a wine cellar 3 weeks ago. He stopped. His face did not have anywhere left to go. She let silence work. Then she said, "Tell the courtyard, Lord Vosmeer. Tell them what you did to Bram." He did not speak. She waited. He still did not speak. She raised her hand. A northern soldier walked forward from the column. He carried, very carefully, in both hands, a small wooden box. He climbed the altar steps. He set the box on the stone where the golden cup had been. Idelle did not open the box. She did not need to. There is a finger in this box. It belonged to my mother's captain. I returned it to the man who took it. I expect every guest in this courtyard knows what that means. A wave of nausea moved across the wedding tables. Roderick lowered his head into his hands. Then Cordelia moved. Cordelia moved fast. She had been a stone statue all this time. She had not blinked. She had not breathed. She had been calculating the way her father had taught her to calculate. Her chances were nothing, and so she moved. She reached into the folds of her wedding gown. She drew the dagger. She lunged. She did not lunge at Roderick. She lunged at Magnus. She lunged at the King of the North because Cordelia Highmore. And understood that if she could not save herself, she would at least take the head that her father had paid Blackthorn Company to spare 23 years ago. Garrick was already there. He had been moving since before her hand reached the seam. The old soldier did not need to see the dagger. He had spent 40 years reading shoulders. He had seen the shift in her ribs. He stepped between her and Magnus. The dagger went into his shoulder. It went deep. It went into the old wound. The wound he had taken at the Coldwater Pass when he had carried his second son's body out of the snow. Garrick did not cry out. He stepped forward instead. He put his great calloused hand on the back of Cordelia's small one. He turned the dagger inside himself, away from his lung, with the calm of a man who had been turning blades inside himself for 40 years, and he twisted Cordelia's wrist with his other hand, and the dagger came out. Cordelia dropped. She did not drop dead. Garrick caught her under the arm before she could fall on her own blade. He set her, almost gently, on the stones. He looked at Magnus. He nodded once. Then his own knee went. He sat on the altar step. Blood ran down his arm. Magnus dismounted. He knelt by his sword hand. Garrick, my king. How bad? It is the old shoulder. The one that has wanted to die for 15 years. It is not going to die today, old man. No, my king. Magnus rose. His red eyes went to Idelle. He gave her the smallest nod. She turned back to the courtyard. The dagger had been the breaking thing. The gathered lords had seen it. They had seen a lady of House Highmore draw steel on the King of the North at a wedding altar. They had seen a northern sword hand take the blade in his own body to save the king's life. They had seen the bride hauled to her feet by northern guards. They had seen her father, paraded now into the courtyard by his northern escort, weeping into his own beard. They were no longer going to defend anyone on the list. They scattered. The 5 other named houses sent their representatives into the courtyard within the hour, bowing, pale, their oaths trembling on their tongues. They offered their lands, their gold, their sons as hostages. Idelle did not take their throats. Idelle was not Aldrich. Idelle took their lands. She took their titles. She took their wealth. She took the right to name their successors. She took every silver coin in their treasuries and ordered it counted in the courtyard before the sun set. And she ordered every coin distributed among the freed thralls of the southern pacts by the 1st of the new year. She had Lord Mareth of Stoneford and Lord Highmore of Highmore Manor and the other named lords clapped in iron and sent in a slow line of carts to the north for trial. Their houses she let stand. Their wives and children she let live. Their banners came down. It would be a very long time before any of those banners flew again. But the day was not over. There was one more thing. There was Roderick. He had not moved from his knees. He was a small figure now at the base of the altar. His crimson and gold doublet was crumpled around him. His hair had fallen across his forehead. His face was wet. He had wept silently the whole hour. Idelle came down the altar steps. She walked across the open flagstones. She stopped 3 feet from him. He did not look up. She looked at the top of his head. It was strange. She remembered that head. She remembered burying her hands in that hair in the dark. She remembered the curve of that skull under her fingers. She remembered loving it. She remembered. She did not feel it anymore. It was just a head now. Roderick. He flinched at his own name. Look at me. He looked up. His face was red and swollen. His eyes were the eyes of a man who had been awake for too long and who had drunk too much, and who had finally, at the end of a very long night, sobered up in the worst possible second. Mercy, he whispered. Idelle, please. Mercy, I did not know. You did not know about your father? No. You did not know about my mother? No. You did not know about the bloodline? No. You did not know who I was? No, I swear it. Then tell me what you did know, Roderick. He looked at her. He could not answer. Tell me, he swallowed. I knew you, he whispered. I knew you were nobody, yes. I knew you were a thrall, yes. I knew you could not shift, yes. I knew you loved me. I knew you would stitch me up when I came back bleeding. Yes. I knew you would die for me. Yes, Idelle. I am asking you what you knew, Roderick. I knew I was using you. Yes. I knew I would never make you my mate. Yes. I knew I had promised you I would. Yes. I knew I had been promised to Cordelia for 2 winters before I ever touched you. Yes. I knew. Yes. He stopped. The courtyard was so quiet she could hear his throat work. He whispered, I knew I sold you to a man I thought would kill you in the snow. Yes. Mercy. Idelle. Mercy. She looked down at him a long time. The wind moved her hair. She felt the pendant against her chest. She felt Bram's old hands wrapping it into her palm. She felt the snow under her bare feet on the long road. She felt the chain on her wrists. She felt the heat of her father's hand on the velvet quilt. She felt the cold moonlight on her white fur in the clearing. She felt all of it. She did not feel love. She did not feel hate. She felt something cleaner. She felt justice. You will live, Roderick. He looked up. For one wild second, hope crossed his face. You will live. But you will not live in this courtyard. You will not live in any courtyard. You will not live in any village. You will not live in any house. You will not live with any name. You are stripped of your title. You are stripped of your alpha. You are stripped of House Vosmeer. She turned her head. A northern smith stepped forward from the column. He carried a black iron brand. The brand had been heated all afternoon in a small brazier just inside the gate. The smith had been waiting with it the way a midwife waits with clean cloth. The brand was the rogue mark. It was an old mark. It was the oldest marker. A single jagged line crossed by a second jagged line, the shape a wolf without a pack made in the snow when it staggered to its death. It had not been used in 3 generations. Idelle had brought it back. On his brow, she said, 2 soldiers came forward. They knelt on either side of Roderick. They held his head still. Roderick screamed. He screamed before the brand even touched him. The brand touched him. The scream went up out of his throat, the way a man's scream goes up when his body finally believes what his mind has been refusing all day. The smell of burned flesh and burned hair drifted across the courtyard. The soldiers held him until the brand had done its work. Then they let go. Roderick fell forward onto his hands. His forehead was a charred mess. His pride was gone with it. Idelle did not look away. She made herself look. She owed Bram that. She owed her mother that. She owed a small girl in a thrall's loft, who had not had eyes to look back at her own life, that. When the brand cooled, Idelle reached into the folds of her silver cloak. She drew out a leather pouch. It was the same pouch, the same one. The one she had been given to carry once, 3 years ago, when Roderick had counted his rents in the back room of Vosmeer, and made her hold the bag for him, and joked, with his arm around her shoulders, that one day she would be the woman who counted his treasury for him. She had kept it. She had not known why. She'd loosed the drawstring. She tipped it over. 300 silver pieces rained down on the flagstones at Roderick's hands, one by one. She did not pour them in a stream. She tipped each coin separately with her thumb, the way a woman counts out change in a market, and each coin rang on the stone with a single small clean note, and the courtyard counted with her in their heads, because there was nothing else to count and nothing else to do, and they had to hear it. Every one of them, every lord, every lady, every cousin, every kitchen boy hiding behind a column, one by one, 300 times. It took a long time. It was meant to, by the time the last coin rang on the stone. Every man in that courtyard who had ever bought another man knew, in his bones, that the price he had once paid was a number that could be counted, and that someone, someday, would count it back to him. Roderick wept on his hands. He wept openly. He did not try to gather the coins. He did not have the strength. Idelle dropped the empty pouch on top of the pile. She said, quietly, so that he could hear, and the men behind him could hear, and the gods above could hear. You will live, Roderick. Every day you live will live with this on your forehead and these coins in your dreams. You will live in the Deadlands. You will live with no name, no pack, no door, no fire. You will live until something out there finds you, and on the day it does, you will know, in your last breath, that you traded a queen for dust. She turned away. She did not look back at him. She walked up the altar steps. She stepped past the discarded golden cup. She stepped past Garrick, sitting on the stone with the king's hand on his good shoulder. She stepped past the smith. She stepped past Cordelia, who was being lifted by 2 northern soldiers and would spend the rest of her life in a stone cell at the foot of Wormwatch Keep, where she would have a great deal of time, every winter, every single winter, to remember the night her wedding ended. She walked to her gray mare. She mounted. She rode out under the broken gate with her father on her left, and 300 dark steel riders behind her, and behind them, scattered across the flagstones of Highmore Manor. 300 silver pieces shone in the firelight, like a small constellation that had fallen out of the sky. 6 months later, the body of Roderick Vosmeer was found in the Deadlands, killed by common rogues. No fire, no name, no grave. The North had its first new law. No man, woman, or child in the lands under the moon crown would ever again be sold for coin. The thralls of the southern packs were freed. The chains in the courtyards came down. In the inner ward of Wormwatch Keep, a new statue was raised. It was not a statue of Idelle. It was a statue of Bram, a simple old man in a brown cloak, his head bent. A small girl's hand in his, the statue stood in the place of greatest honor. Idelle had insisted. On a spring afternoon, 6 months after the wedding, Idelle stood on the high battlement of Wormwatch Keep. The snow had pulled back from the lower fields. The pine forests below had begun to smell of sap and earth. Falcons turned slow in the warm air above the towers. She wore a simple gown of dark wool, a circlet of dark iron on her brow. Her braid hung over her shoulder. She put her hand to the silver pendant at her throat. Bram, mother. Father, justice is done. Far below, in the inner courtyard, a small child stood at the foot of Bram's statue, eating a piece of brown bread. She had been a thrall of Vosmeer Castle 6 months ago. She was no longer afraid. She was a child in a courtyard, in the spring sun, in a land where no one would ever buy her. She laid her small hand on the carved hand of the old kitchen master, and she walked away into the rest of her life. End.